Sir, I'm essentially just going to walk you through the purpose of the story, and then I'll get your general insights, and then we'll move towards more specific questions, if that's okay. Um,
Sure.
so essentially, we wanted to do a bit of an explainer story, and considering that a lot has already been said, we wanted to see whether this entire debate stems from a human resource problem, or is it something more sort of central to law practice in general in Pakistan? Before I ask you more specific questions, I just want to see where you stand in this debate. Particularly, um, of course, I think both of us can agree that exploitation and underpayment is not okay, but I think a more sort of specific insight to why you think this happens and where you stand.
Look, I won't speak for Lahore or Islamabad because I don't have personal direct experience of the market practice there. I'll speak for Karachi. I don't think there is as much of an exploitative environment in Karachi as there is in Lahore and Islamabad because there are just the supply of young lawyers is far greater in Islamabad and Lahore, supply of good young lawyers. So I will speak for Karachi, and I think it's a service industry issue as a whole. Again, I haven't thought of this at any academic or a structured level. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. A lot of it has to do with law firms being recipients of cyclical payments rather than constant payments, especially litigation law firms, as Faisal Naqvi said when it started this whole debate. And that leads to there being an attempt and a desire at keeping overheads as low as possible. Um, there's also the issue that again Faisal Naqvi highlighted, which I agree with, that beginner lawyers aren't really very useful, even if they're very bright, even if they are going to become great lawyers. In the first couple of years, they're kind of adrift, and their capacity to add value is limited. But having said that, and this is something that Faisal Saab didn't mention, that law firms, knowing this, will use them for rather rigorous, rather tedious, and rather non-professional jobs, such as sitting around in a court all day or, catering to extra whims of clients, photocopying, and stuff that would not usually be done by anyone with a university degree, let alone two. So there is a lot of abuse there. Where my position is on the issue, I think everyone deserves a stipend. I don't think I don't think it should be called a salary. I think that's why the problems start. I think in the first couple of years when you're it should be considered a form of pupillage, but there should be a stipend. You shouldn't be out of pocket. And the reason why I say that is because if you are able to be out of pocket, you then close the doors of this already very conservative and patriarchal profession to other entrants who do not have the luxury of being able to afford not really being paid. But if you look at the way doctors are, I'd like to push that forward as a model that you work very hard for very little until very late in life, and then it kind of becomes a very rapid increase in your mid or late 30s when you actually become a doctor as a whole. I don't want to give that compare. I'm just saying something off the top of my head. I can give you my own example though. I try to pay enough money to everyone in my firm, even if they're freshly qualified, to allow them to afford the coming and going from court and coming and going from work. Perhaps not afford it in style, but to afford it and to afford the food and related workplace requirements, and to afford the basic needs of a working environment. But I don't pay too much more than that. But I do have an incentive system, which is unique to our firm, or is unique to a few firms like our firm that come from the same parent firm of Munir Sabs, whereby to try and keep overheads low and to not have this, uh, competitive salary structure, we instead have a system whereby whatever case you're working on, if you are able to handle it independently, if you're able to craft it independently, you're given a percentage of that case's fee. And that ends up being, for my more senior associates, in months where I make money, they end up making more money as well. And that's a risk that people who work with us take. And I think that's far fairer than systems which would be exploitative, not pay well, and then also not pay well in the months that everyone else does well. So that's something that I don't have too many qualms with. Having said that, I do think that this leads to me not being able to retain very good talent at times, who I would be able to retain if I were to be able to promise them, day in, day out, month in, month out, a wage that would be compensatory of their skill level. But at least there is a chance there. Now, as far as young associates are concerned, sorry. Now, as far as young associates are concerned, I don't like anyone working for free. So even if someone's interning, I will try to give them a very minimal amount, but an amount that lets them feel like they're working. And I'm not saying it's living wage amount. And that's why I don't take on internees. I don't really need them. Well, no, I shouldn't say that. Can you strike that,
Yes,
please,
of course.
in edit? That's why I don't take on internees, because I don't want to create that expectation of linear hiring thereafter. And I try to create a legal model which doesn't require too much, free work and free court visits, and which is entailed through an internship program. And we have a very, we're 4 partners now, and we have a very, very sought after position in the firm. There's a lot of applications for summer internships. My other partners do take them on. So I speak for myself here that I try not to. And I try not to because I don't want to enter that cycle of exploitation. But I'm not saying I don't. I will sometimes this summer. I might. It also depends on your circumstances and how you plan on spending that summer. But this is internship, so we're digressing. But I will speak for my junior associates, because I've recently taken on a junior associate, and a few years ago I took on another one. And then the thing is that when you don't work with the junior associate directly, you don't realize that it's been 2 years of them, hanging about, and that you need to take this much more seriously than you feel that it is being taken, because that associate, for that person, it is, their entire life, it's their career. So I do think that, I'm not saying that I've done this seriously, but I have given it serious thought of late. And I do have serious misgivings with calling someone a net loss, because they aren't a net loss. You wouldn't take them on. We're not charities. But they are in legal terms, in terms of what they can bring to the legal brief, or what they can bring to the experience of court. They are not yet ready. But that doesn't mean that a law firm doesn't exploit them to the fullest and use their abilities to the fullest otherwise, whether it be drafting or research or replies to audit notices or retainer clients or what. There is no way in my mind that a lawyer will take a net loss. If that was the case, there would be no juniors. There would be no positions open.
Right. And sir, I think I've spoken with a bunch of people, a lot of partners and some students as well, a bunch of junior associates. This seems to be a recurring theme where partners believe, like you said, that, beginning lawyers are, their contributions to the firm are quite minimal. I mean, they're in their learning stages. And the value that they bring isn't at par to, sort of their expectations of what they should be paid back and so on. And on the other side, you have the junior associates who are working 4 jobs, right? And I was speaking to somebody last night, and he said, when I first began, I was working 4 jobs that my partners had gotten me. So he was doing a TA ship with them. They had linked him up with somebody else. So he said, if 4 people can recognize my ability to do well in the law, why can't I be paid, the same amount by one person? But I want to just ask you, when you say that,
I can answer that. I can answer that because they should be paid. This person who you speak of should be paid that amount by one person, but that one person can't afford it. And from the outside, you might see it as something that they ought to be able to afford, and perhaps they should reprioritize their life in a way that they are able to afford. But a lawyer has significant overheads for a service industry. It has significantly larger overheads than other organizations. There is a client dealing aspect. There is you need to have space and capacity to project yourself upon a client, to behave for a client, and that leads to, at least in our case, it leads to percentage overheads that are far greater than I have at least ever seen in an accountant's firm or in a doctor's firm or in any advanced degree profession. Because of that nature of needing to deal with clients, the need to be able to work in fifth gear all of a sudden after piddling along in first for a week or two, which is the nature of a brief if an urgent brief comes in. So you need to have that capacity. So lawyers are very averse to taking on fixed charges. Lawyers who are institutions, lawyers who work as part of institutions are able to do so, and they create the best practices in the field. But I'm sure that if a lawyer of my standing was able to, with confidence, determine that on the first of every month they would have an amount in their kitty, come hell or high water, come whatever, come what may, they would then be able to, with confidence, spread that money more evenly and more consistently. But because that's not the case, you have many clients who don't honor the commitments of paying after having committed and after having had work done. There are many clients who try and undercut at every opportunity. There is no structure of recovery from such clients. There is no concept of consistent payments for per hours worked. There is a far bigger concept of lump sum payments, and that money becomes old very quickly. That work does not. Hourly billing is something you can only reserve for companies and people who are my age and younger. This understanding doesn't exist for someone who is of a generation above mine, who seeks legal opinions on the phone for free repeatedly. So there's a lot of structure that is necessary before you are able to say to someone fresh out of law school that, look, I'll pay you what Shell pays their legal advisor fresh out of law school. Because there's a certain amount of money in the bank that Shell believes will be in the bank every month to be able to make that payment from. So there's a lot of personal insecurity as well. There's a lot of structural and firm insecurity that goes in there too.
Sir, I understand what you're saying. Would you say then that legal practice in Pakistan is an undervalued service, which is to say that when you interact with clients, that they're hesitant to pay you the amount that as a partner you think that you should be getting for the sort of work that you're doing? Or from what I've understood when I've spoken to other people, clients don't necessarily care too much about quality. From what I've understood, they just want their work to be done, and they would be willing to put in that money, in other avenues if that meant that they would get, that they would get the outcome that they desire. In that situation, would you say that the problem is of affordability and it's of law being undervalued?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think you are paid what you're worth. I think that there is a demand and supply to these things. I don't agree at all with the idea that clients don't pay for quality. Clients do pay for quality. They pay for speed, they pay for efficiency, and they know what they're paying for and who they're paying. And there's enough lawyers out there for that value to not be what I'd want it to be. But that would be true for any lawyer anywhere in the world. Yes, there are no practice requirements of there being a minimum amount billed across the industry like there is for solicitors in England. But you couldn't have that requirement because the vast majority of lawyers that work here, even if they could meet some arguable practice criteria, which in my view they couldn't, they would then set the bar so low that they would render it redundant for lawyers who want to work at a standard. So I don't think it's undervalued though. I think there is an instability and there is a structural imperfection in the entire scheme. And because, it's our job to enforce contracts, but yet we can't enforce our own contracts with our clients because, the structure doesn't exist. So I think that's where the problems start.
So where do you stand on the argument that a minimum wage needs to be implemented?
Of course it needs to be implemented. Of course it needs to be implemented. I completely agree that it needs to be implemented. But having said that, I think that a stipend should be considered, and a pupillage term of a few years should be considered before that minimum wage kicks in. And look, this is just again off the top of my head, if it is agreed that regardless the stipend should be minimum wage, then so be it. But that will change how many jobs are available in the market quite drastically.
Yes. This is a really interesting point. I was speaking to somebody last night, a partner, and he said he inherently disagreed with this debate. He said it was extremely elitist to be speaking about these things in the first place, particularly speaking about minimum wage, because he said you need to look beyond law firms and you need to look at, the fact that a lot of law practice is in the chambers, it's independent. And if you were to say that, you can't work without a minimum wage, then you're creating this sort of black market for lawyers and you're moving a lot of people away from employment within these chambers as well, right? You're making it inaccessible for a lot of people to be able to practice law, which I thought was quite interesting, but I wanted to take your viewpoint on that as well. Do you think that implementing a minimum wage would create some sort of structural unemployment in the legal industry?
Firstly, I think that it can't be implemented. It's unimplementable. But if it was somehow implemented, it would be widely abused. And if it wasn't widely abused and you got all these lawyers to behave themselves, then it would lead to a huge shrinkage of the available spots in the legal industry, because it's not far beyond minimum wage what the average senior lawyer earns in Pakistan. Look, you have to look at the numbers here. If there are 15, 20,000 lawyers practicing, able to practice in the Sindh High Court, if there's 40 or 50,000 able to practice in the Lahore High Court, the vast majority of them, actually, I'll speak for the Sindh High Court because I have experience here. Other than maybe 500 lawyers, most of them earn near minimum wage, those lawyers that practice in the High Court and the lower courts on a daily basis. They don't earn far more than minimum wage, at least. And even those top 500, you'd have to, focus on the top 100 to really see the millionaires. So it's a drop in a very large pond. And for the vast majority of people, law is a very middling profession. It's a hard profession. You turn up to city court on a bus. It's not really what you see on the movies at all. So you have to keep that in mind when you're talking about these minimum wages. And look, granted that the capacity and the process through which a LUMS graduate has been through is far superior to what that learning experience of that person that I just described as that middling lawyer. But they are in the same industry. They're
Sure.
doing broadly the same thing.
Sure. So when you say that you implement stipends and you say that, you argue for a pupillage system for the first couple of years, comparable to what, junior doctors go through, I want to understand whether you think that this also requires a structural change in terms of laying out a clear career trajectory for young lawyers. And a lot of people that I spoke to that work in law firms say that they can't simply predict what their career, trajectory will be in the next 5 years because there's no set progression.
Yes, there's a lot of conversation that needs to happen within the legal profession, but a lot of that conversation is far, far more important than young lawyers' trajectories. We need to figure out that there should be a consequence to lying in court, a consequence to delaying cases for 20 years, a consequence to letting people die rather than enforce their rights. There's far greater problems here than, the young lawyer isn't being paid properly. Or doesn't have a significant identifier of where they will be in 5 years. Young lawyers don't have this luxury anywhere in the world. Young doctors don't have this luxury anywhere in the world. You don't really know where you'll be. The pupillage in Britain is as elitist, as restrictive, as shut out as any entry into law firms here. This profession itself is conservative. It is designed for the elite. It is designed to not be inclusive. It is designed to not be affordable for people who view it as a profession for the most part. It's designed to create great commentators who can't really, eke out a living. It's the same all over the world. The British criminal barristers are going on strike because they're not being paid living wage by their governments after having 10 years of experience. So this is wherever there is self-regulation and wherever there is a practice regulation through bodies of and associations of professionals themselves, you find problems. And obviously we are Pakistan. We have our own way of ruining things that otherwise work. So we have it harder.
Sure. So this is something that I'm asking all the partners that I'm speaking with. When you first started, what were the first initial years of your practice like in terms of the pay scale, the hours that you were?
Mine is an atypical situation. So I will explain. When I first started, it was 2007, and there was a lawyers movement on, and I went and worked with my A-level law teacher because that was really the only lawyer I knew. And there was no pay, but he was kind enough to recommend me for a lecturer's job at a tuition center at a University of London affiliated tuition center in Karachi, which calls itself a university. It really wasn't. And that was the income that I lived on for 6 odd months, which was the amount of time I worked with him. But because of the listlessness of the profession at the time and the amount of upheaval and the kind of nonsense I saw in courts every day, and courts being shut down and people arguing about the amendments to the constitution that Musharraf had done, which was way above my understanding or capacity or interest, really. I kind of thought, this isn't really something I can do. So I deviated and I went into the media instead. And then when I came back, it was 2014. I kept teaching the law. I kept in touch with the law by teaching the law and because I had friends in the law, but I wasn't directly practicing as a litigator or as a consulting counsel. But when I came back in 2014, it was out of this realization that I'm going to enter my middle years and I'm going to be financially insecure because the media profession was also exposed by then as being something where you have to be you have to be a right-wing nut job to really earn anything, or you have to be very, very well established, just the top of the top. And I wasn't either of those things. Thankfully, one, regrettably, the other. So it was time for me to find something that pays the bills or has a better chance of paying the bills. So I entered as a form of mature pupil, if you will. I was 28 or 29 years old, and I entered my friend's practice again. So I will highlight the privilege here. I would never have gotten that placement otherwise. I was placed with far younger people who were far more knowledgeable of the law than me. I was that way in a difficult situation. I was also in a difficult situation because I had to navigate the fact that it was my firm's partnership in that, my friend's partnership in that firm that had let me in. I was working with people who were not too much older than me, but were vastly superior to me in the profession. I was working with people who were far younger than me, who were still vastly superior to me in the profession. So mine was atypical. But yes, when I joined, I wasn't really paid badly. When I rejoined in 2014, I wasn't paid badly, but that was because of my otherwise standing, if you will, and my relationship with my employer.
Right.
I don't know what it would have been had I don't think I would have been. Actually, I do know. I wouldn't have been employed. I was too atypical in a like it made no. I was a net loss, if you will.
Right.
I was actually a net loss. Actually, it's a pretty fair understanding of me because I was actually the person who wasn't sent on the chore, rigorous, useless errands and wasn't given the random things to sort and stack, which otherwise would have made me worth my salary in my first 2 years. I wasn't given those things. So I really was a net loss
Right.
to that friend of mine who happens to be my senior partner now. I
Right.
hope I'm still not a net loss, but yeah.
So just as the last question, I think at the beginning we established that of course, that there's a bit of a supply and demand problem. And of course, the quality of young lawyers that are coming in is another problem that's been highlighted. I just want to get your insights because you've taught the law as well. Is there an inherent problem within the curriculum that's being taught? Is there, in terms of there being a bit of a lag
No,
in?
there's nothing wrong with there's nothing wrong with what's being taught. The problem is that we're making too many university graduates. We need paralegals. We need people who can work in the legal system. We need people who are, other than lawyers. Every graduate doesn't have to be. Firstly, look, we have to have a minimum standard. You know, I didn't teach at a bad place. I taught at a place that was adjudged to the LSE external standard. But there are universities that have the right to issue their own degrees, that are issuing degrees to people who have no business being graduates. The bar councils are then giving licenses to people who have no business being licensed. So that is the first place that I would want looked at. That the corner shop milkman also has a law degree and puts on a suit and goes for the ehtijaj the day that someone wants to burn a police mobile. And that has to stop. So, like I said, these problems of these young people, will come to it as a profession if we first sort out these inherent basic problems that the voting in the Sindh High Court and in the Karachi Bar is led by and gravitates towards these groups of people who really have no active practices, and their positions are averse to the interests of practicing lawyers, of regularly practicing lawyers, and they are the people that are pandered to by every aspirant to political office in the law, because there's many more of them. There's just many more of these people who want to pretend to be lawyers and would refer out a case a month if they get it, and hang about a law firm. Then there are people who can actually do the job. So you have to weed them out first, or give them a status that is something other than advocate high court, and then we can take it from there.
Sure. Sir, thank you so much for your time. This was a
You're
really
welcome.
comprehensive, really helpful conversation.
You're welcome.
And I'll
You're welcome.
send in the snippets that we choose to sort of work with.
Can you send me the whole recording?
Sure, G, I can send that in. I'll send
Can
you
you
a
just send me like on the WeTransfer, because I want to share it with my firm.
Okay, sure. G, I'll just send that
Like I
over.
won't share it publicly. I'll share it with my firm, and I'll share it after you've shared the snippets.
Okay, G, I can definitely do that. But thank you for your
Thank
time,
you.
sir. Hope you have a great day.
You're welcome.
Hafiz, take
Thank
care.
you very much. You too. Bye bye.